So it's really fantastic to see kind of an increased focus on evidence-based humanitarian response and that increased funding for research on humanitarian WASH, especially in those recent years. But still, there are many missed opportunities to learn from kind of ongoing programs and the interventions that we carry out. And so thinking about research and innovation, we're really thinking about how this fits in with the Global WASH Cluster and launch of the WASH Sector Roadmap. So in 2020, obviously you all know this, kind of the Global WASH Cluster and the WASH Sector Roadmap was launched. And it really thinking about how to enhance the capacity of the WASH sector to deliver predictable quality, which is thinking about that evidence base for quality, humanitarian response through kind of collective commitments and strategic partnerships. Now, of those 17 initiatives, one was on research and innovation. And so this is co-led by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Tufts University. So we're just going to give an overview really of what's been happening in terms of the initiative and some updates for kind of us to discuss. So our time frame for 1.5 is roughly kind of 3 years or 36 months. So anticipating, we kind of started activities last year in 2021. And we're kind of anticipating that we're going to be going on till 2024. We've been able to thankfully receive more than the funding that we required and secured kind of over $600,000 to fund the initiatives or the activities, sorry, within this initiative. Now, there's lots of synergies to many of the other initiatives that we see. So kind of predominantly is the WASH Hub and how that's going to be built, thinking about the WASH data repository, and then other partnerships with local universities. And probably there's like loads of other initiatives that we have synergistic relationships to, but these are the ones that kind of come to the forefront of our minds immediately. Now, there's 5 objectives that we're going to run through for the kind of WASH Research and Innovation Initiative. And so this is what we've kind of based our plan on for the next few years. So the first objective is to create and maintain a library of WASH literature for WASH practitioners that is accessible by the Global WASH Cluster website, so kind of getting that research available and ready for them. The second is to create a repository of templates and tools for the monitoring and evaluation of emergency WASH programs, again, accessible to practitioners via the Global WASH Cluster website. And then third is to update the emergency WASH research agenda and provide technical advice to emergency WASH research and innovation proposals. The fourth is all about dissemination, thinking about updating you on the latest WASH evidence and providing an annual research conference known as the Emergency Environmental Health Forum for emergency WASH practitioners and agencies. And the fifth really is what encompasses all of this and all of these activities together, is about creating a network to support research partnerships between academic institutions, agencies, that donor environment, and so on and so forth. So we think about this in terms of phases. So we've kind of chopped and changed the order of those objectives into the phases in which we approach them. So phase 1, which we'll present first, is thinking about how we've updated kind of the emergency WASH research agendas and thinking about that technical advice. And then objective 4, which is how we're doing dissemination through the Emergency Environmental Health Forum. And then in the latter part of the presentation, we'll talk about phase 2, which is where we're going to think about, talk about where the library of WASH literature and repository of templates and tools will be created. And that objective 5, like I said just before, is really kind of continually active going on through this whole process about creating this network, kind of fostering a really collaborative environment to really push research and innovation forward in the sector. So starting off with phase 1, and I'm going to hand it over to Danielle here to talk about the WASH gap analysis.
Hey, thanks everybody. So the WASH gap analysis was instigated by HIF as part of an update to their 2013 gaps analysis. So in 2013, HIF did a gaps analysis to identify in humanitarian WASH major challenges, stakeholder perspectives, and funding priorities. They wanted to update that to come up with new priorities, and they wanted to include gaps from people affected by crisis and responders and also the existing literature. Next slide, please. And so what HIF and their partners did, and this included a long list of partners, Jane McCluskey, Andy Baskell, John Allen, others, Lama, Simon, all working with Oxfam and other organizations. They led 62 facilitation teams that led over 120 focus groups. These were with Oxfam, UNICEF WASH Cluster, local, national, international NGO, and UN agency. Next slide, please. And so what ended up happening was there were focus group discussions with people affected by crisis. There were focus group discussions with WASH practitioners in country. And then there was a global online survey of people more at the global level. Tufts was brought into this project on the later side to help with analysis and writing up results and dissemination. And so we kind of took these total gaps that we identified, which is about just under 3,000 gaps that people mentioned. And we first broadly categorized them into a main theme of water, sanitation, hygiene, WASH all together as a package, or cross-cutting themes like gender or something else like that. And what I want you to see in this graph is that we saw really different themes emerge based on who the people were. The people affected by crisis mostly talked about the need for water and sanitation. And the global online survey mostly talked about cross-cutting issues and overall WASH. So we saw different responses from different people. Next slide, people. Next slide, please. And so when we look at the overall results of the WASH gap analysis in these kind of we also did some literature reviews, which I'm not talking about here, but from these 4 strands, we really see, as I mentioned, like focus group discussions, people affected by crisis, and practitioners. Number 1 was need for water supply and provision, right? Number 2, need for sanitation and proper solid waste disposal. You see, it's really about basic WASH services. And when you talk about the online survey, the people at the international level, it was need for coordination and collaboration, need for WASH staff capacity, training, expertise. So you're seeing that these different gaps from different people, which makes sense based on where people are. Next slide, please. And so the overall results of the WASH gap analysis were that people affected by crisis wanted the what, which is services. Responders wanted to know how to provide these services. And then the research side of things wanted to know why, like what's the health impact. And so what we ended up doing in this team, it was Tufts helping with the analysis, Cranfield and Leeds helping Oxfam collect the data, supported by the Global WASH Cluster, funded by HIF. And what we ended up doing was we wrote a report kind of looking at these gaps. HIF has really moved forward trying to understand how to incorporate these gaps into their new funding call. And Tufts actually led, we just got the paper accepted a couple weeks ago. And so there'll be a peer-reviewed manuscript on this as well. This, I would say the kind of 1-sentence summary I would say about this is this did not provide research gaps. This did not provide innovation gaps. It was really interesting because when we asked all these different people, we got such interesting results. But what we might consider a research gap or an innovation gap is not what the responders considered the gaps they wanted to mention. And so while there was really valuable things that came out of this, it wasn't a research gap exercise. This was also kind of in planning well before the roadmap kind of came on board. We just wanted to kind of include this here because it's a piece of it that we want to talk about. And now next slide, and I'll hand it back over to Lauren, who will actually talk about the follow-on that R2HC did on research gaps specifically.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, so as Danielle said, then we kind of thought, okay, well, let's think about the research and what needs to be done in washing crisis as a sector. So this is a project really aims to generate a consensus-based research agenda that really can steer the wash sector for the next kind of 10 years and really think about how we're investing in research, how we're prioritizing it, and really thinking about who needs to be doing some research, how they're going to do it, and really getting us all to agree to a kind of a general list to push that forward. And so this is something that we did. It's kind of a standard kind of methodology. It's based on something called the Child Health and Nutrition Research Initiative. You don't need to know that, but it's just if anybody needs to look it up, we've kind of followed a really kind of rigorous, kind of transparent and consultative process to really get a list of research questions that we want to invest in. And so thankfully, I think many of you who are already on the call were part of the respondents who answered our questions. And we came up with a list of 130 research questions. And we asked you as those who are active in humanitarian WASH, kind of from different organisations, from NGOs to UN agencies, to governments, to donors, to academics, to other individuals, even WASH cluster coordinators and local NGOs on the ground, to go through that list of 130 and prioritise those that you thought were at the top. And we had fantastic response. We had over 200 50 people, I think 286 actually people responded to this to help us really identify what should be the priorities for the next 10 years in terms of research. And we had, you know, it wasn't just Eurocentric or Western-centric viewpoints. We had those who are kind of focusing on the African region, the Eastern Mediterranean region, or kind of globally, that really thought about what the priorities for their setting and for their areas. And, you know, it wasn't, when we talk about this area of expertise graph over here, we asked people what were their area of expertise in WASH. We didn't want to have a bias with those who were responding to say, oh, only people who were interested in fecal sludge took the survey, and therefore that meant that was at the top. No, people were really, really kind of wide in their expertise. They kind of covered all different types of WASH interventions. So therefore, we understand that we've got a good idea of what the sector as a whole wants to prioritise in terms of research. And so here is just the top 10. This is our headline results. Kind of for you, I do apologise for the small text. It's quite hard when it's research questions, but you can see here that these are kind of the groupings of types of questions that were coming up. So lots of questions about kind of distribution of hygiene materials and non-food items. So thinking about, you know, hand washing infrastructure and how to make it more sustainable or maintained. Thinking about what are effective and appropriate NFI distributions within crisis contexts. What promotes any operational sustainability. Or we have other questions that were more on the general WASH aspects. So this is where it'd be kind of talking about what adaptations to WASH interventions are needed in crisis contexts for people with disabilities. What adaptations or consultation is needed for women and girls to provide them with safe and accessible WASH. Thinking about those population groups that perhaps are kind of vulnerable or neglected within our programmes, and how we really need to think of research that could be conducted to kind of improve that inclusion. Then other aspects, sanitation came up really high on the list of research priorities. And so people were prioritising questions that were talking about improving the experience and the utilisation of existing sanitation in humanitarian crisis. How do we do that? We need some research to understand how to improve that. Particularly, again, we've got inclusion of women and girls, we've got people in inclusion of sanitation and people with disabilities. And thinking about what existing approaches and existing technologies are available to get people to use sanitation, to improve their access to sanitation. And lastly, within our top 10, we had things like behaviour change interventions to improve hand, domestic and kind of personal hygiene. And so again, we wanted to really reflect, and we're thinking about the research that needs to be conducted about how do we identify, define and categorise the determinants of hand hygiene, particularly within different crises, and how do we really get people to improve and sustain those hygiene practices. So this is where research we think is still lacking in humanitarian crises, you know, and would like to prioritise that going forward. And so as part of this project, we're really thinking about kind of what are the next steps. We're gonna come out with a big report early next year. You're going to see it. We're going to talk about it a lot. It's going to be at multiple events next year. We're really going to push this kind of top 10, top 20 research priorities, because we really want to gather a lot of energy behind the sector to really get this research out there and get some of these questions answered, because I think some of them are quite easy to answer. We just need the resources behind them. So that's kind of our objective 3 of our kind of research and innovation initiative. And I'm just going to jump to then kind of objective 4. So this is our phase 1 approach. So many of you will be aware of something called the Emergency Environmental Health Forum. So it's been running since it's a conference that's been running since 2004. I think we're going to be on our 12th one in 2023, and it's led by the interagency group and kind of coordinated by us at LSHDM. Just a big announcement for you guys. It's going to be on the 10th and 11th of May next year, 2023, and it's going to be held in Budapest, Hungary. So just this is our mini announcement for all of you who are interested in coming and attending. It's typically now it's a hybrid event, but we really do encourage in-person attendance. And it's kind of reflecting again, we want to build that collaborative network. We want to build on kind of in-person attendance, you know, meeting of partners, meeting of academic partners and NGO partners to understand what research needs to be done, and then kind of forming those relationships to get things going. Now for next year, the theme is yet to be announced, but we will be launching the call for abstracts on the 15th of December this year. And next year, we're even going to build a website to tell you all about the EEHF and to be an actual repository for the research that's been going on in the sector. And that's kind of merging with kind of Initiative 1.1 and the WASH Hub to really get that kind of synergy between the two. And at the moment, we're currently co-funded a little bit by ELRA, the interagency group, and potentially some funding by BHA in the future. So that's phase 1. Now we're going to move to phase 2, and I'm going to hand back to Danielle to kind of talk about phase 2 of the 1.5.
So BHA, as one of the successes of the roadmap, BHA reached out to Lauren and I and asked for an unsolicited concept note to look at funding some of the rest of this roadmap activity. So we wrote a grant that was just funded by BHA and started to do 5 activities, which is to expand and maintain the resource library on the global WASH cluster website, create templates and tools to support sector M&E and R, complete webinars on monitoring and research gaps, and staff a help desk at the global WASH cluster on research, complete webinars on research updates and linking to the sector, and then and probably the largest piece of all of this is to create a local network of researchers with local training and coordinating newsletters for working with Global South institutions to do training they need on doing humanitarian research and localization. So if you go on to the next slide. So the first one, I'll just do one slide on each of these quickly. On this library of WASH literature, there is an existing knowledge management library on the Global WASH Cluster website. We've kind of done that with the Global WASH Cluster ad hoc for a couple $1,000s a year for the past bunch of years. It needs updating. It needs to be much more easily usable. It needs summaries. There's a lot that needs there. And this would be dedicated funding to do that. So we'd expand that knowledge management site. We'd create and manage an uptake usage strategy. We'd complete monthly peer and gray literature searches, and we would update that site. I also apologize for any typos in the slides. I'm in the midst of, I did a red eye from Boston to Geneva last night. Didn't really sleep much, wrote some of this presentation on the plane. So I'm kind of, just forgive me if I'm a little blurry right now. Okay, next slide. The second thing is on this website, we want to expand it to have some tools and templates. So we want to work to have an uptake and dissemination strategy, what's needed, what do people want. And then we want to develop a whole bunch of things to put on this, ethical approval processes, templates, directory of training courses for ethical approval for human subjects research, develop study protocol templates, share quantitative and qualitative data collection tools, share environmental sampling collection and analysis, standard operating procedures, and then build a directory to the Ecuador network as well to talk about sharing tools and templates and data. Okay, next slide, please. We do want to do a webinar series on gaps in research to kind of get out there some of this information we have. So again, starting with a uptake and dissemination strategy informed by users, we want to disseminate a holistic WASH and crisis research agenda, the GAP agenda, and the Welcome Caller agenda. 2 of the 3 of those were just presented shortly before, globally, nationally, and locally. Design and implement a technical help desk for research and innovation projects at the global WASH cluster level. Develop and refine an uptake and dissemination strategy. I think that's already there. I really shouldn't do things from the plane. Organize a quarterly webinar series on WASH and research strategy, and provide ongoing WASH research support to the larger sector. And the next slide. And we would like to, there should, I think one slide might be missing. It's in the next phase. There were some edits that happened while I was at my meeting today that I missed, so clearly I'm just gonna go. The project was actually kind of surprisingly squeezed in for funding within the fiscal year of this fiscal year. So the funding actually started September 15th, kind of unexpectedly, but we're actually going to start it January 2023. I was hoping to announce the staffing on it today, but I think I can do that next week. We're pulling together a staffing plan for this, and we'll pull together a technical advisory group on this next, in the next month or 2. And if people are interested or have anybody that would want to be involved in that, definitely feel free to reach out. Okay, and then next slide. And I think do I keep going? Yes, I keep going. I missed that part. So the other piece of this, and this is really exciting, is this network for research and innovation in humanitarian response, which is to establish partnerships between academics, NGOs, governments, and donors, identification of needs, and new research topics, WASH research capacity assistance, really looking at what institutions need and training, coordinating newsletters, and inclusion of those partner perspectives throughout this whole grant as to what they want to see to encourage localization and inclusion of Global South institutions in humanitarian research. And so if you go to the next slide. I think I'll hand it back to Lauren just to wrap us up.
I'll stop sharing. Yes, thank you very much. So that's our real crash course in everything 1.5 and kind of everything we've been doing and kind of plan to do for the future. And so you know, lots of partners have been involved in lots of this process. You know, Tufts and LSHGM, yes, we co-lead a lot of this, but we're working with most of the partners within the WASH roadmap and beyond that, actually. And we've had really good engagement from the kind of research and innovation side kind of across the sector. And so, yeah, that was our 30-minute basically crash course in 1.5. And I think it's just for us to open the floor if there's any questions. I know we've gone through quite a few projects quite quickly. But yeah, so if anybody has any questions on what we've been doing or what you would like to be involved in, especially in research and innovation, or have anything to say at all, open the floor to you. No questions?
Can I come in?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so this is Jamal. I'm sitting here together with Omar. My question is on, you know, let me frame it a bit first. Increasingly, we are seeing that there are protracted crises and multi-year, like 10 years, 15 years, even 20, more than 20 years. And then when we look at it from that angle, so our research probably should also, I mean, in addition to others which you mentioned, it should also include something on resilience and how we should build that resilience in communities. From my experience, what I have seen is that in different countries, for example, we can do a lot of things in emergencies because we get a lot of funding, and then when we are in a protracted situation, gradually the funding starts reducing, and then we leave the people on their own because of obvious reasons. I mean, a lot of agencies, they come and go. Now, what happens is that in that sort of situation, it's left to the country, wherever they are, that they find a solution for themselves. And what I feel lacking is, or it's not exactly lacking, it's something like capturing the experiences and the type of work which has already been done in many situations. For example, in South Sudan, I saw that I mean, in a lot of other countries also that could happen, that they have these solar panels through which they power a small borehole, and from there they go to a water kiosk, and the water is being sold at the water kiosk, and then there is a person appointed by a committee, and that person is in charge of keeping or selling that water. Now, in that given situation, that could be the solution for that problem for a longer term because of lack of resources, because of sustainability, and because of many other reasons, that the government doesn't have the capacity, etc. So what I'm trying to say here is that maybe we could also work on something more like from bottom-up approach, something which is already being done at that level. It's more a practice. So it's not something like we sit in our office and we think that, okay, what sort of solution can we find? There are already solutions, but how we can make it more sustainable and more resilient. So I'm just throwing some ideas from that angle. Thanks.
Danielle, I don't know how to take this. I'm not sure the question as well.
No,
I think
that makes a lot of sense. Why don't we cue things up a little bit? Because I think Nicholas and Francois, I wasn't sure who was first. Does one of you want to jump in?
Alphabetical, Francois.
Yes, now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, just wanted to thanks for your presentation. It's great to have this initiative being well developed, and I think I've read this gap analysis that was published by ELRA about maybe 6 months ago. Maybe that was it. There's a lot in there, but maybe one question is, there's always innovation that is taking place, and then we might have some innovation that we're driving to some extent within our own projects. And is there, I think you have this, it's included in your library project to have this place where we can share innovation and maybe have it visible so that we can connect to other people working on the same topic, even though it's not planned anywhere. But then it's popping up as a as something that it would be good to connect with the other players. Is that what we can expect from the next for phase 2?
That is the goal of a lot of the BHA grant, is to create this network and to create this kind of space where people can have where it's not just a sitting searchable library, but has a lot more power to convene. And so that would be the goal. We have not started yet. But one of the things is we would like to pull people together to tell us what's needed before we start it. And so we'll start on that process with the technical advisory group.
And as a question, because it's quite difficult sometimes to create a new kind of point on the digital space, and people know about it, and just have them take the time to contribute. I guess you know about Knowledge Point, right?
So yes, so it's very much to bring up, to kind of carry on with Danielle's point, is that this 1.5 is working with 1.1, which is the Knowledge Point being set up as the WASH Hub, and it's going to be a co-hosted space. So it's not that we're creating a separate parallel unit. We're basically getting everything ready, and then they're building the kind of web infrastructure to host research and innovation materials. So we're working kind of directly with Course on how they design, however the design's going to go for the Knowledge Point. Yes, they're very much happening alongside, also to save us the work of designing any sort of websites or digital spaces ourselves, right?
Okay. And is there any timeline for this? No.
I think it's a 2-year project, our BHA project, and starting in January. So I don't know when. I don't know the timeline for cost. And all of this is also just to say with the Global WASH Cluster website. So that's also a resource, and I'm not sure how all of that will come together.
Yeah, did you, because that's kind of triggering this overlap between the roadmap and the cluster. Is this something you've kind of figured out how this would work?
In terms of, I mean, certainly I think the cluster needs to be a key part of the kind of research and innovation project. And so I see them as a partner. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I guess there's kind of the expectation that the WASH roadmap as well is going to host this to some extent, no? So you'll have to choose.
Do we have to choose? I don't think that's.
So it's a question, huh?
I think the question is, it's very much the 1.5, although that it is a roadmap initiative, all of this is embedded within the Global WASH Cluster website, because it's for Global WASH Cluster organizations to access through that repository. I think wherever the website itself is hosted is a more technicality kind of issue, but I know that we are being hosted within the WASH Hub, and so it's kind of a directory from there. But it's very much, this is a co-led initiative. It's Global WASH Cluster, Tufts and LSHTM leading this together. So that's the kind of identity of the initiative, and most of the things that are happening within it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Nick, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much for the presentation. Really cool to see all the stuff that's going on, and congratulations on getting all that funding in, and yeah, doing so much. And it's kind of under the auspices of the roadmap, but it's really, really broad as well. I was really interested in that last point that I think you've already touched on, Danielle, about this network of local organisations interested in research and innovation and other sorts of capacities, and just, I mean, it's something I've been thinking about actually just within care recently, and so yeah, really cool if you're doing that more broadly. How do you see that happen? I know it's work in progress under that BHA grant, so it might not all be mapped out, but do you see this sort of almost being a call to organisations or institutions to sort of apply to go onto a sort of register, or a sort of nice map where you can you can identify potential partners and click on them and get contact information, or how do you see that going?
So I think how it's envisioned right now, although everything is subject to change at this point in time, is we have funding to do direct support to about 5 institutions, including travel, whatever support that might be needed. So ideally, we would work with our technical advisory group to understand where there might be research needs that a local institution is interested in doing, they might need some training. And I think ad hoc, like Monica has definitely been reaching out to both Lauren and I with clusters who are interested, like the Lebanon cluster is potentially interested in doing some research on caddies with American University of Beirut. So we can help give some of the protocols from other CAT-T evaluations to AUB because they're not familiar with them. So I think that it's going to be kind of this direct, so there'll be some ad hoc support, but there'll be kind of direct targeted support to probably on the order of 5 Global South institutions. That'll be kind of long-term support. And so I think that the idea is we'd work with the technical advisory committee to identify like which institutions are interested, who are those partners, and if you're already thinking about this, I'd love to pick your brain about this. If you have ideas for a country to focus in or a place, and then help, like my goal would really be to like help those institutions be able to write grants and get funded, right? And so that's kind of the outline right now. It has not hit, I mean, the next stage of all this after the New Year is to really pull together the technical advisory group meetings to really understand like what people want. And I do say the whole grant is meant to be responsive. There's a very like broad outline of what we'll do, but one of the things I know, like maybe there'll be one email to the help desk, maybe there'll be 500, right? We'll kind of go with what people need or want, and that kind of flexibility is ingrained in how it was put together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it sounds on the surface of it, that's perhaps more focused support and lot more ongoing support for a smaller number. I was again just very tentatively just thinking of trying to get a better light contact details and associations with potential partners like that who could be on the research innovation side, could be on sort of training delivery side in a number of countries. Where I'm coming from, I mean, an anecdote is I was asked with tiny amounts of notice just a couple of weeks ago to fly to Malawi for 2 days to deliver a training. And it was so crazy because half of what I would have been talking about would have been climate change impact on WASH. And it was like, well, 10,000 mile round trip to do a 2-day training is not going. Surely with a bit more time and a bit more preparation, we could have been partnering more better locally to deliver exactly that or training. And okay, yeah, that's on training as opposed to research innovation. Appreciate, but it could be the similar institutions have that capacity and interest. Anyway, it's in the back of my mind. So yeah, happy to keep talking on that, Danielle.
Fantastic, thank you. And I see hands from Odd and from Rebecca.
Yeah. Tineke, let's go. Sorry.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, I was discussing with Claire, my colleague who was also here present, that if needed, we could help, with identification of the partner universities. We have a lot of contacts also through the Global Sanitation Graduate School and our projects that we're doing and our student community. So any help there, we could assist.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay, that was all from my
side. No. Okay. We'll definitely reach out.
Thank you very much, Danielle and Lauren, for your explanation. Very clear. But I have one question. It's about the research priority, because it's a very broad issue, and a lot of organizations have been working on for years. So I'm just wondering if you have already an idea on how you are going to address this issue. For example, the number 10, because it's so broad that I have a question about the methodology and how you will treat this question.
The 10, to clarify, that's the 10 research priorities order. On my internet. Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I have my connection is not very good, sorry.
No, I think it's my connection, don't worry.
So do you heard my question?
I'm not sure if anyone can hear me. Danielle, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Lauren?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I think it's my connection. Yeah, I think so for the research prioritization, yeah, so it really is us kind of the sector has decided what that list is, and kind of put forward these ideas, and it's really thinking about now based on kind of the VHA grant and kind of these other activities of how to build, you know, how to get donors responsive to these research priorities, how to get NGOs, UN agencies, governments responsive to those research priorities, to start collaborating, to start forming some of those connections, that network, thinking of those, 5 institutions, getting them to be part of those research proposals, because the donors are already interested. We've been speaking to a few of them already, and they're really willing to fund a lot of that research that's happening, or so that's been prioritized. And so now it's kind of thinking what next steps, what kind of enablers and enabling environment is needed to get those off the ground. And so thinking of examples and training and capacity building as well to really get those prioritized. And I think it's more for our side, especially when it comes to monitoring how any of those have been answered. We're going to be tracking them. We're going to be seeing what's coming out over the next couple of years. Are any of these questions being answered? Are people investing their time, their resources into answering a lot of that research? So it's kind of a call to action at the same time, especially within this group and other initiatives here of the roadmap, to say, can you get your organizations more interested in research? Now we have a clear list of things that need to be answered, and that will really help the sector and improve that evidence-based programming that we need.
Okay, thank you very much, Lauren. Very clear, thank you.
Any other questions from the floor while we have you?
Maybe I have a very general one, and then thank you very much. Nice to hear from both of you, and nice to see both of you as usual. Lauren and Daniel, I'm Claudio here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A general question, a bit of a curiosity. I mean, a few years back, I remember the use of geospatial data and the GIS expertise started to come into the sector a little bit, but now it seems to have a little bit halted, or at least I'm not reading the proper papers developed by the support of a geospatial analysis of data. In your discussion with BHA and in your project, are you also considering this set of data and how they could help in bringing forward the research agenda of the WASH sector? Over.
Yeah, I think there's lots of tools that can be used to answer research questions, and whether that's GIS or quantitative tools or qualitative tools, I certainly think GIS is a great tool, and I think it's not, we didn't specifically have tools laid out in the proposal. Like the proposal would kind of follow what people need. People need support on GIS, that can be provided, right? If that answers the research question they want to answer. I don't know if I can put Omar on the spot, but I know that UNICEF is actually doing quite a bit with GIS and WASH and the WASH sector, working with the Frontiers Data organization. So I think, and I know that IMs do quite a bit as well. And so I think there's a lot ongoing. It's not specifically in all of this, but it certainly could be. Does that make sense? No, Omar, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Danielle. Indeed, I mean, it is not necessarily the joint monitoring program, which is a WHO UNICEF initiative, but it's something very closely linked to it. We're trying to institute a data collection system. As you're aware, the JMP itself is predominantly based on MICS, the multi-index cluster survey, and other DHS and other types of surveys, which come sporadically, if you like. They're not like, they are, we as UNICEF, we are the custodian of the MICS, and we organize them and we plan them and so forth, but things happen, of course. But what we're trying to achieve is institutionalize a data collection system. And by that, we're trying to work on the geospatial data space and others. And we hope that this will be successful. It's still in the making. We are making baby steps, but I think it's slow but sure. I think we will eventually get there. And hopefully one day, not in the very far future, we will end up having an institutional system for data collection. I hope that answers, Danielle. Over.
Thank you for saying all that.
Got a question.
And thanks for being willing to be put on the spot. And Claire?
Hi, I just wanted to mention some of the initiatives that we've been looking at, which cross over with possibly your tools and also the monitoring and evaluation. So we've got Tanika and I have a research project called Risk Wash, and we're looking at adaptation of risk assessment tools for the humanitarian sector. So we're looking at things like sanitation safety planning, adaptation of kind of a SaniPath tool that also looks at vulnerable groups, so such as the elderly and disabled or people with disabilities, and also QMRA, but using it within the humanitarian sector. And an output for this project will be kind of some tools that will be adapted for use in the sector more. So I think that might be kind of some crossover, and then eventually perhaps these could be used, especially kind of things like the sanitation safety planning could be used to look at kind of, I suppose, monitoring and evaluation and learning in the sector.
Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. And I'm glad to hear about the Risk Wash project. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions from the floor, or yeah, anything to add on research and innovation? If not, then just thank you for your time. Yeah, well, brilliant. Thank you very much for all of you to be there, and yeah, thanks for your time and listening to us and presenting the research and innovation 1.5. Yeah, we're kind of planning lots of updates in the future. We've got a lot of things to release and present and publish in the next couple of months, especially. And already a big thanks for those of you, most of you have taken part in every exercise that we've been doing, kind of the gap analysis, the research agenda. The next 2 years of BHO funding will kind of require all of your participation. So a big thank you in advance for the time that you're going to dedicate to this. Yeah, thanks very much. And thanks to Ord and to Lynn as well for organising.
Of course, thank you both so much for representing Initiative 1.5 and leading this great discussion. I think everyone will agree with me if I say it was very interesting, and we've got great points to see ahead of the next few months and years. And just so you know, we'll send you the minutes of this virtual coffee, and the recording of the session will be on our website.
Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it from UNICEF's side.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you. Have a great afternoon and good luck for those at the
Happy
Groundwater
holidays
Summit.
if we don't
Thanks,
meet again before year end.
True.
Okay,
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.